There we go. Woo!
Thank you very much. Are we awake? So, as Daniel said, I bring rubber duckies to my talks because I don't believe in the demo gods. When something goes wrong on stage, I either help the ducky help me out in the middle of whatever I'm doing, or afterwards I just use it as a therapeutic session because it's cheaper than actually going to a therapist in Switzerland. That's where I'm from. So, today we're going to be talking about a topic that's been close to my heart over the past couple of months, or even over the last year and a half. How do we design future-proof, resilient payment systems for products that scale to tens of millions of users? And I'd like to start this with a little bit of a fun, interesting fact. Now, I'm based in Switzerland, and I came over here, and over here the currency is not Swiss francs. So I don't just use my Swiss banking card to make payments over here. I use something called Revolut. Other people may use Monzo. Now, is anybody here a Revolut user? Or a Monzo user, or one of these mobile banking platforms? Monzo, let's go. Right, so what's really interesting is that when these applications came about, what was so attractive about them was that you could get near or exactly the same foreign exchange rate as when you searched up how much is the currency conversion between Swiss francs and euro, or whatever currency combination. You don't have to pay any fees. Whereas every time you traditionally pay with a credit card, you've got a lot of fees to pay. And now, one may wonder, how do they actually achieve something like this? And it's done by something called liquidity pooling. And liquidity pooling is this concept where Revolut actually has multiple bank accounts in multiple currencies, or multiple accounts in multiple currencies. One, let's say, in Swiss francs and one in euros. And so if I want to convert 100 Swiss francs into euros, it may not actually make that exchange rate on the global market. What it might do is find another person that's interested in making the exchange rate from euros to Swiss francs, pool that together, and make the internal exchange. And that's how they get that spread so thin, that margin so thin, and we can really cheaply change money around. And so, why do I start the talk like this? Because it's incredibly hard to move money at a global scale. And when you're building a SaaS platform, you're not building it just for your home country, you're building it for the world stage. And so how do you build payment systems that can do just that? And so I'm going to move to a real story that actually came about a couple of months ago. And this is a little bit of a funny one. So now I work at a company called Small PDF. We have tens of millions of users per month, so a small amount. And we had an outage. And this outage was because, by some mistake, somebody deleted an account with which one of our payment provider API keys was associated with. And that was a Braintree API key. And when that API key was deleted, I don't know, I think it was 9 o'clock at night, nobody was online. And all of a sudden, nobody was able to process Braintree payments. And we go to our tracking dashboard, and we start seeing this. Braintree token fetch error. And the numbers start to go up really, really fast. No alert at this time. I think it actually took around about 4 hours to realize something went wrong. And so 1,420 users are impacted. And those are users specifically trying to start a subscription. And that's no small amount. The token was deleted, no request functioning, not even a percentage. And now, when you have such a high volume of subscriptions, because Braintree is not the only provider that we work with, it's very hard to discern spikes. This is a spike that exists purely for this payment provider, but since we're using multiple different payment providers, that tends to shadow anomalies. So it's hard to discern when something is going wrong. That's why alerts aren't happening. Now, if I move over to our Datadog dashboard, that tells us how many subscriptions are being created. Just when that spike is happening, you see them tank to 0. Or near 0, because some other payments are being processed in other ways. Does that sound good? Does that look good? That's painful. You want to see how much that cost? The incident was from 9 p.m. till 10 a.m. the next day. Working hours, right? Yeah? Whoever was on call was not having a good time. That's 12 hours of downtime. 12 hours where you're unable to accept payments. That is absolutely atrocious when you're operating 24/7. Human beings don't operate 24/7. You've got to sleep. Platforms have to operate 24/7. And we lost around $5,000 to $10,000 in missed subscriptions. But that's not it. You miss out the subscriptions, but you also miss out on customer trust, because whoever was visiting that platform failed to actually do any payments, they're not going to revisit that platform, or at least going to hesitate. Usually your trust is lost around about 30%. And we're going to change that. So, my name is Faris. I'm a staff front-end engineer at Small PDF. Some of my previous experience is in designing connected TV platforms such as Discovery Plus, GCN, Eurosport. I've worked in growth and monetization teams in the past, a lot around fintech, and then also fitness technology, since I had a little bit of a fun time with CrossFit in the past, as Daniel alluded to. I love all things web performance, but if you want a web performance talks, my friend Mateos is the best one to go to, and I love engineering leadership, and I also contribute to Raycast in my spare time. I actually developed the official Stripe extension on there. Anyone here use Raycast? There we go, that shit's great. And I'm the co-founder of Zurich.js. So if you see people wearing a yellow t-shirt, there's one person that works for Wasp, and the rest is Zurich.js. Right, so what are the struggles with payments? There's currency and FX, as we talked about. Now, when you want to pay on a platform, you want to pay in your local currency. So if I'm in Switzerland, I want to pay in Swiss francs. If I'm in another country and it's in another currency, I'm not going to put down my Swiss debit card or credit card and want to subject myself to the FX fees. Customers are hesitant to actually trust any platform that does not serve a subscription in their local currency. And fees eat up into a business's margin, because we want to be able to provide software as cheap as possible. And there's also another thing, optimizing payment methods per country. Now in Switzerland, we have a payment method called Twint. That's what we primarily use. Probably if you haven't been to Switzerland, you'll have never heard of that. I was in Bangkok a couple of months ago. Over there, first of all, cash is king, and then QR code payments. That's what you use over there, and they're connected direct to their bank accounts. Everyone's got their native solution for managing payments. And there's a lot of complexity behind that. So, as I said, for Switzerland, it's Twint. Then for Brazil, it's Pix bank transfers. In India, it's UPI. And in the Netherlands, it's Ideal Payments. And there are more and more and more of them. And Mateos really nicely led the stage for me, because he talked a lot about Alipay, and that's going to come down a little bit in this talk. So earlier this year, we actually introduced Alipay at Small PDF. And just to give you an indication of how impactful it is to introduce a native payment method for a country, we actually saw a 3.5 times increase in annual recurring revenue in China. That is no small amount. And we're going to even see a case study later on how these micro adjustments can make an incredible difference and allow you to provide more localized and cheaper payment options for your users that allow for much stronger and healthier conversions. There's another complexity, which is regulation and compliance. Now, there's certain countries where there are sanctions. So you may not be able to operate in certain countries for reason X, Y, and Z. And so what may happen is if you're operating in country X and it's a sanctioned country, your payment provider may cut off your ability to accept payments, not only in that country, but any country, because your risk profile is too high. And so if you're operating in like hundreds of cities, hundreds of places, it's really hard sometimes to keep track of how to route things based on what's sanctioned or not. Especially there are also restricted transactions. There are certain types of transactions that are more likely to be fraudulent or not. When it comes to, for example, Small PDF, it's a very interesting case. We're a subscription-based platform, and I know there's an argument for being one-time based payments, but you don't have PDF needs every single day. Your PDF needs may be when you have to do your tax report, so you're going to merge a bunch of PDFs together. But yet we offer subscriptions. And so what may happen is to be able to get access to your ability to download the result from any modifications to a PDF, you may start a subscription, use all our pro features, and then you may dispute the transaction with your bank. And then your bank's going to say, why is Small PDF coming up with so many of these disputes? I'm going to pull the plug. There's also another thing, which is you need sometimes a local business entity. You don't have an entity in every single country, and so sometimes you can't accept payments. This is the case with UPI in India. You need a local business entity, and there are all these tax complexities around with it. And so this is actually where merchant of records are very interesting. So Stripe, for example, or Braintree, these are payment providers, but all the tax and compliance liabilities on you. Then there are merchant of records, which have slightly higher fees, but then you're offloading all the compliance stuff to them. It's another level of abstraction, but sometimes with abstraction comes limitations. And you want to sometimes be able to have that flexibility, so you may not go for a merchant of record, but that's why that business exists. So there's country-dependent compliance. You can't just put one rule everywhere. So for every single country, this is an evolving space. There are even some systems that use machine learning to like dynamically redirect things based on financial reports on whether a country's on a sanction list, or there's certain rules, or certain banks aren't operating, or maybe Credit Suisse went down and got merged into UBS. Imagine all the payments that went through there and everything that got paused, the amount of businesses that may have to redirect things that were delayed. That can be critical if your business relies on certain traffic routes to be able to accept payments. So as I said, there are chargebacks and disputes. Certain businesses are subjected to a lot of chargebacks and disputes. Sometimes you'll go and see on your Revolut payments, you're like, I didn't make that payment, and maybe it's because even the name of the business is not the same as the one you subscribe to. Maybe they have a different entity under the hood. There are all these things that change user behavior. And so when your dispute level also gets very hot, chances are you're going to have the plug pulled. And when you're dependent on one provider and you have the plug pulled, that can be detrimental for a business. And there's also another thing there, which is reliability and uptime. One assumes that a business runs maybe 100% of the time, but every single provider has its downtime. And we over here are seeing the downtime for 99.9% agreed SLA or uptime. Yearly, that allows for around 8 hours and 45 minutes of downtime. That's all right, that's a working day, we can live with that. Most of these financial providers have to abide to the 5 nines, which is 99.999% availability. And that is only 5 minutes and 16 seconds of downtime per year. Now what's really interesting about this is that Stripe and that Braintree and a lot of these payment providers will say that they have 99.999% availability. But that's global platform availability. That doesn't necessarily mean that every single payment provider is available during that uptime. There's uptime that's more granular at the level of payment providers or currencies. And that's where sometimes these things trick you, because you believe that it'll work all the time, but when it doesn't, you're in a bit of a pickle. And so if we just look at Stripe's downtime over the past couple of months, they had PayPal errors, for example. They still claim they had 99.99% availability during this time. PayPal errors for an hour and a half. Not too bad. Then they had bank contact errors for 45 minutes. Then they had general API errors for 2 hours. And in 2 hours, as a lot of subscriptions missed. Things got a little bit worse if you go to PayPal's status page, and you can see the downtime for the first incident is 8 hours, a full business day. And if those are the 8 hours that intersect with one of your high ARR countries, like a high ARR country, maybe the US, and the US is where you get the majority of your more expensive subscriptions from, and the downtime occurs during that period, you're impacting where your highest point of revenue is. There comes the subject of payment orchestration. And you can think of payment orchestration like air traffic control for payments, directing the transactions to the best route based on the cost, the speed, and the reliability. Now, this is a framework-agnostic architecture. This is an architecture, so it doesn't mean you have to implement it in React or Angular or anything like this. You can implement it in vanilla JavaScript. This is a pattern. It's quite a simple pattern, but more at a conceptual level, it takes a bit of time to understand why it's useful. So I'm not going to be showing that many coding examples because implementing it is very business dependent. So what is this payment orchestration thing in more detail? It's one system to manage multiple payment providers, and that can be advantageous for multiple reasons. So, as we said, it routes the transactions based on cost, success rate, and region. And this is why A/B testing is also really important, because Stripe, for example, automatically optimizes for whatever the best order of payment methods are in their Stripe Elements UI. But that order of payment methods isn't necessarily the best order for your business. They may say that PayPal in Switzerland is the best payment method to put first, but maybe if you run a couple of A/B tests and you run some analysis and get to statistical significance around what gets the best trial to pro conversion rate, it may be that link payments works a lot better for you. And so being able to override these payment providers with your own rules and your own priority orders for payment methods is also something important to do. We shouldn't just blindly test what's given to use what's given to us. This also, of course, reduces points of failures. We reduce reliance on a single provider to avoid that downtime. And what's interesting is that a lot of these providers will give you better commercials based on how much traffic you put through them. So actually having a multi-gateway setup allows you to move those negotiations in a healthier way, because you're not blocked on just Adyen giving you the best rate possible. You can redirect your traffic to Stripe if the commercials don't work for you, wait to get better fees or better reduced fees from Adyen, and then you can redirect payments back to them, and we'll look in more detail how that's done. And then, of course, you optimize the payment method per country for the highest success rate. And just because there's a credit card terminal, or just because there's a credit card element in the UI, that doesn't mean that for every provider there's the same success rate. For example, in India, Adyen as a credit card element has a much higher success rate than Braintree, but you're still putting in your credit card. There are a lot of things under the hood that determine the success rate. Especially it's the balance between whatever card schemes you're using, like Visa, MasterCard, and Amex. So if we look a bit more detail and comparing two providers in this graph over here, we're comparing, first of all, countries and fees to see what's the better deal to get over here. So if I look at overlapping countries for Revolut and Stripe, and I have the United Kingdom, Stripe gives me a 1.5% fee and a 0.2 pence fee per transaction. Revolut offers me 1% and 0.2 pence. Revolut's the clear winner here. France, same case. Revolut's the clear winner here. In the European jurisdiction, Revolut is a clear winner. And so you're going to be able to, you may charge your user the same price, but you're saving a lot more money on your end. And you may be dishing out that money elsewhere, but when you have to use Stripe and the fees are a little bit higher. So it allows you to be able to balance your pricing strategy a lot better. Because you may not want to price in China and India for the same prices as you do in the US. It's a different audience. But then there are cases where you have Revolut that operates in Cyprus and Estonia, and Stripe does not. So you're entirely restricted on expanding into a market based on the gateway that you use. And so again, Revolut here is the clear winner. Where Revolut fails is expanding into the United States and Canada. And while the fees are higher, you have no choice. If you want to expand into that region, you have to go with that provider. So you're not just having the conversation about fees, you're having the conversation about support for different regions. And while multiple payment providers may give you the same payment methods. For example, most payment providers only offer Alipay as one-time payment solutions. Stripe is one of the only payment providers that allows you to use subscription-based payments for Alipay, which is recurring payments. And it's got its own separate complexities. So sometimes it gives you the ability to connect to multiple gateways, so you can offer multiple ways to pay for a service. So what does the front-end architecture look for a system like this? Now we start with a user opening up a checkout. We initialize something called an orchestration layer. And the orchestration layer uses business logic that you would decide via A/B tests or whatever you do with your product team as to what's the best way to pick a gateway. Maybe you pick a gateway that a customer is already using. If I subscribe with Stripe, I'm going to stick with Stripe. So that's best. Maybe you want to prioritize experiments. So if you're in a particular A/B test segment, you want to prioritize gateways to test them out in new countries. Or maybe you want to prioritize based on currency or country. There are all these combinations, but essentially, at some point you consume a global state and a rules configuration. So what are the rules to route this through? And this is a static set of rules, or you can probably set this up in a dashboard, but static is pretty simple to start. And what we do is we consume the country state, A/B test states, and then the currency list. And this is all, for example, in the Redux store, but it can be placed anywhere. Next, what happens is we take those three pieces of information and we move them into a decision tree based on whatever business logic we've decided to figure out how do we prioritize these payment service providers. And the key word here is prioritization, because just because it's the PayPal payments that were failing and I want to still have PayPal that works in Switzerland because that's what my customers want, I'm just going to add Switzerland as a supported country, and now you have Stripe and PayPal payments in Switzerland in 30 seconds. You are always 10 minutes away from operational, and your only limiting factor is the speed of your build pipeline. Thank you.